Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So I'm pleased to welcome today Moshe Denburg, who will present a talk on Jewish music as an intercultural bridge. Moshe is well known to many of you as the founder of the band Tzimmes. You may not know this, but our very own Gary Cohen, who provides the music for many of our services, was one of the original members of Tzimmes when it was formed in 1986. Moshe studied composition at the UVic, and as his band's name suggests, the music you'll learn about and hear today is a sweet stew that reflects Moshe's worldwide travels. Moshe is committed to presenting Jewish music in its many styles and languages, incorporating European Klezmer, Mideastern Sephardi, and North American folk influences. And he performs in Hebrew, Yiddish, Ladino, and English. He hails from a well-known Montreal rabbinical family, and he moved to the West Coast in 1982, bringing his passion for Jewish and intercultural music with him. I should highlight that the music you are hearing upon entry into our Zoom call today was by his band Tzimmes. Moshe is also the founder of the Vancouver Inter-Cultural Orchestra and has written many large-scale compositions that bring together the instrumental and musical resources of many cultures. So for millennia, our Jewish people have lived as global wanderers among alien cultures, and to preserve our unique identity, we've continuously integrated foreign elements into our music. And that's created a new intercultural synthesis that transcends the limits of geography. So, please join me in welcoming Moshe Denburg.
Marilyn, thank you very much, everyone. There's many familiar faces here. Marilyn, I'd like to thank you for the invitation, and Kolot Maim also, and all of your helpers and staff, and the Klei Kodesh, like Rabbi Lynn and everyone else. I'd like to just give a special shout out to my very, very long-time friends, lifelong friend, Gary Cohen, and his partner, Amber Woods. They are known as couscous to you, and there they are. And it's wonderful to see them. It's also wonderful. I'll just very quickly say, Louis Sutker, thank you for coming, Louis, and great friends for many, many years. It's wonderful to see Betty and Irv Nitkin here too. I know there's others, but just wanted to give a shout out to my very, very close friends. So let me just tell you that this is going to be a crash course here. It's going to be really, really fast and trying to get through a lot of material. So you'll have to forgive me and yourselves if there's a lot of things, a lot of gaps and a lot of questions and things that are not covered, because it is very difficult to cover a lot of stuff in 55 minutes. And I'm already down to 52. So what is the aim of the presentation? I want to introduce you to an overview of Jewish music. That's first of all. Then, in the context of that, to explain how our wanderings as a people have resulted in a mutual enrichment of cultures. Thus, we see Jewish music as an intercultural bridge. We have been in that kind of position throughout the millennia. And then I will very briefly introduce the intercultural project that I've been involved in today. In other words, where it's at in the world and how I've actually put Jewish music into my work interculturally. I am now going to share a screen very quickly. I mean, I'll toggle between screen and our gallery view here. You could see me, that's fine. But I have to show you a certain graphic. And this is what it is. Just a moment. No, I don't have it here. Just a second. Where's my, oh, I know. Here's my Google. Okay, share this. Now, perhaps you can see now. Tell me, Marilyn or anyone, if you cannot. But there should be over here 3 circles, and this is called the 3 streams of Jewish music. Do you see it? Yes. Okay. I'll just big screen that. Now, there are 3 streams of Jewish music in this conception of an overview of Jewish music. There's the Ashkenazi, the Sephardi, and the Mizrahi. Ashkenazi, probably most of you know, it means the Jewish people of the more Western world, Europe and West, the Ashkenazim. The Sephardim are originally a Jewish people from Sepharad, and Sepharad literally means Spain, who went around the Mediterranean and other places as well. So it's not again geographically perfect, because after the expulsion of 1492, the Jewish people, the Sephardim, went all around the Mediterranean and also to places like London and places like Amsterdam, and some Sephardic music after that comes from many different places. Mizrahi literally means Eastern. That is actually, I would argue, our birthplace. We're born in the East, Middle East. It's Israel. That's why Israel is in the center of this and is the only country geographically that I placed is part of every circle, right? So that kind of worked out fortuitously. Mizrahi means Eastern, and it is the traditions of music and Jewish experience. It comes from the Eastern cultures. And you could see Lebanon, Syria, East Asia, Iraq, Yemen, it would be Iran as well. And that is really the Eastern side of the equation. In between these things are different places like Egypt, Greece, Turkey, which kind of serve as connectors. Now, there are people who would, not who would, but I have received very valid comment. What about the Balkans? Why do you say the Balkans is Ashkenazi? The truth is that it also has different elements. Because in the Balkans, you had a lot of Sephardi music going on there, Sephardic traditions. But you see, that's why this isn't perfect geographically, but also when you get into Europe, which includes the Balkans, that's getting into the Ashkenazi tradition. And the Ashkenazi tradition of Jewish music is informed by lots of the Eastern stuff that we got from North Africa, the Arabic music there, from the Mizrahi, and so on. And so there's a lot of combinations. Now I'm going to go out of the sharing of this. I'll come back to it later, or you can actually see it if you want. You can actually take a look at the Tzimmes website. You could bring it up anytime you want. Tzimmes.net, and Tzimmes is spelled as you see up there, TZIMMES.net, and you could find it under Jewish music. This and Jewish music and overview if you want to bring up the entire article. Perhaps you already have, but that's what you could do. Now, I want to start with Ashkenazi music. Ashkenazi music is basically the music of the Jews of, I'd say, Europe, and of course going west. That includes klezmer. Now, klezmer is not all, a lot of people think, oh, klezmer, Jewish music, klezmer. It's not exactly the same thing. In actual fact, klezmer is the instrumental celebration music, not only celebratory sounding, but the music of celebrations that was played in Europe from the 19th century and into the early 20th century. It was revived, and it started to be called klezmer music because it was revived in the U.S. and in North America, and now all over the world, as a type of Jewish music that was revived and preserved. Now, I don't know whether you know, but very quickly, the word klezmer comes from two Hebraic words, meaning kli, which means an instrument, and zemer, means song. So an instrument of song. This is philosophically very interesting because it denotes the Jewish musician, the klezmer, right? Like the Klei Kodesh. Who is the Klei Kodesh? Rabbi Satker is a Klei Kodesh. Rabbi Lin is a Klei Kodesh. Klei Kodesh are the holy vessels, right? And that's what we call those people who are part of the synagogue who are taking care of the liturgical offerings. So klezmer is the klezmer, the person who actually is a vehicle of song, is channeling this song into our world. Now, that's the philosophical thing. To get down to it, the actual modes and this is very interesting, the modes that exist in klezmer and in the synagogue, the modes of prayer are the same modes. They're dealt with differently. But for example, here is a mode that you guys will know. That mode is na da dee da 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 dee da 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 dee da 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 dum. That's the scale of the mode. I will explain to you in a moment what a mode is. But that is used in the synagogue. It's actually called, and the klezmer musicians would call it, and still do, a havarabah. What is a havarabah? A havarabah is a prayer, and that prayer typically was sung to this mode. If any of you have been to the traditional synagogue over the years or have heard traditional prayers sung in these traditional modes of prayer, you will recognize that. I will very quickly tell you the difference between a scale and a mode. This has to be very quick, but I think you'll get it. You see, what is a scale? A scale is a collection of notes. So Avarabah, you could say the scale of Avarabah is the ones that I just sang to you. Da dee da da dee da 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 dee da 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 da. A mode is exactly what it sounds like. It is a way, a mode, a manner of utilizing these notes. So if you're doing a havarabah, to make it a havarabah, you're actually starting with a very typical melodic formula. And you don't have to worry about repeating it 1,000 times, because that is the place where we can enter that mode. And let's say the ending. So this is a manner, a mode, and that's the cadence. We even call it in prayer, and I'm perhaps getting a little too conceptual, but it's called chatima, which means a signature or a cadence. And that is what makes a scale into a mode. It's the way you use the actual notes. Now, the language that is mostly associated with Ashkenazi music is, as you might have guessed, Yiddish. Of course, there's Hebraic, and that is the thread that runs through all of Jewish music everywhere. The thread of Hebrew. Why? Because the prayers are in Hebrew, because the Torah is in Hebrew, and it's Hebrew. And in fact, some of our oldest music is biblical cantillation. We don't know for a fact that all the biblical cantillations that we're using are what was sung, thousands of years ago. But the actual markings, the actual, the notes or the indications for different movements of notes have been there for a long, long time. Biblical cantillation is a Jewish invention, definitely. Now, so what I wanted to say is that Yiddish is a vehicle for Ashkenazi music and Hebraic song as well. There are certain typical rhythms as well in all of these different music. Here's the rhythm take a Hebraic aspect of Ashkenazi music, of Jewish music in the Ashkenazi realm. It also is gone everywhere. In Israel, everyone plays this. But when Gary and I were doing Tzimmes and playing for people, we played something like this. Siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov, siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov, siman tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, siman tov, yehei. So that rhythm, which makes you want to move and dance, that's the whole point of it, right? That is called the Israeli way of expressing it, and I have used this all my life because I lived in Israel early on, is esta esta. It even sounds like esta 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 esta. And so it's a freilach in Yiddish, meaning a happy a context, a happy tune, and that is one of the very typical rhythmic modes, you might say, of Ashkenazi music. There's also there are other rhythms. I have to actually move on to the next stream, so I will leave a gap here, but you guys could fill it in. You can ask me some questions if there's something that I've left out. I will spend the next 3 minutes giving you a sneak preview of one of the pieces that's going to appear on a new Tzimmes album to be released sometime this year. The album is called The Road Never Traveled, and hopefully it's a 2-disc thing, with The Road Never Traveled having some secular and Jewish cultural pieces, and the second disc, a smaller disc called Liturgy Lane. But here is a piece that I hope you'll enjoy. It's called Moshe's Freilach. As you might imagine, it's my piece, Moshe, and this is a Freilach. It's a happy song. It is about 3 minutes long, so it wouldn't take that long, and I thought maybe you'd like to hear it. Let me just get the media player out.
Moshe, it's a little soft. Could you make it a little louder?
Yeah. Just a minute. Is that better? I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I had to take off my I had to put the stereo mix on. I'm sorry, Marilyn. I'm sorry to have wasted 2 minutes. I'm going to play it again. Let's get this done. Okay, that was Moishe's Freilach. I hope you enjoyed it. And now we're going to go over to Sephardi music, and I'm going to put up the screen share just very quickly so you could see the three streams again, and I'll just talk about this a little bit. Okay, here we go. Now we're going to Sephardi. Now Sephardi, as I told you, means the Jews of Sepharad. The Sepharad is Spain. There was a great golden age in Spain, actually under the aegis of the Moors and the Muslims, and the Reconquista, the Spanish, the Catholics, they reconquered Spain gradually, and in 1492 they expelled all of us, and in Portugal I think it was 1497. So there was a very strong culture in Spain, and interestingly, there's a whole collection, a whole repertoire of songs in Ladino. And Ladino is Judeo-Spanish, just like Yiddish is Judeo-German, Ladino is Judeo-Spanish. What is that? It is a language of Spain that Jewish people took with them when they left Spain in 1492, 15th century Spanish, and then it was spoken up until the 20th century. It was spoken in Ladino, in Sephardi communities right around the Mediterranean, wherever they went. And other words got put into the language, words from the local languages and so on. So what is interesting is that a lot of these Ladino songs, a lot of them are secular. They're love songs, celebration songs. I think, if I'm not incorrect, they were kept alive by a lot of Jewish women who kept these things, kept this repertoire alive. In fact, just recently, Flori Jagoda, a very wonderful Ladino, not just scholar, but a singer and an originator, and she kept alive this tradition for a very long time. She just passed away at a very old age. So the Sephardi tradition doesn't just deal with Ladino song, because you see it has North African aspect, and they actually do have Arabic modes that have been used there. And so there's a very strong modal tradition, which is more traditional Arabic modes in many respects. And if you listen to some Ladino music, some of them do have that kind of very older sort of feel to them with this older modal understanding. So if you see where these different connections are, you could see it on the three streams view. Now, I will just say that in terms of typical modes or rhythms, a lot of the time in Spanish music there's a three beat, like 1 2 3 2 2 3 type of thing. Perhaps many of you have heard this song. It's called Cuando el Rey Nimrod. This actually has some liturgical connection. It's talking about when King Nimrod went out to the meadow and looked. He saw a light which over the Jewish quarter, which predicted the birth of our blessed father Abraham. Of course, there's a tremendous anachronism there. How can there be a Jewish quarter before the birth of Abraham? But never mind. This we don't deal with anachronisms here. We just go with the music. So originally it was so some years ago, about 20 years ago, I was part of a flamenco offering. It was a beautiful presentation or production that they wanted a cantor, they wanted some Jewish content, because there's a lot of these Ladino songs actually are part of or are known in the repertoire of flamenco, the older repertoire of flamenco, because there's a shared repertoire there. At any rate, a very good friend, a wonderful flamenco guitarist, Victor Colste, I should mention him. He's the husband of Rosario Anser, who is this great flamenco dancer. They still have a school here. So they put on this production, and he had this idea of making Cuando el Rey Nimrod into a bulerías. What is a bulerías? It's a 1 2 3. It's a three beat, a really strong Spanish 3-beat, and it works like a charm. This also will be on the Road Never Traveled, so really look out for the Road Never Traveled. You don't want to miss traveling this road. And this, I'll give you a little taste of Cuando el Nimrod in a flamenco type of rhythm, which is, I think, preserves and extends the feel of Sephardi, of Ladino music, the Ladino Sephardi music amongst us. Cuando el Nimrod a la campo salía, miraba en el cielo y en la estrella, miraba una luz santa en la judería, y había de nacer Abraham Avino, aquel querido padre que me dicho, luz de Israel, Abraham Avino, aquel querido padre que me dicho, luz de Israel, luz de Israel, luz de Israel. So that's just a taste of it, right? Thank you very much. So there's Cuando el Nimrod to give you a sense of the Spanish feel of it, the Spanish flavor of it. There's other pieces. Here's another piece, another 3-beat piece. It's also a Tzimmes. It's on an album of Tzimmes's, which is, I forget, I think it's A Lid for Every Pot, the same album that Marilyn was playing Shabbat Yerushalayim at the beginning. And this is definitely a romance, sort of a serenade, a love song serenade. Abre tu puerta cerrada. See, anyone who speaks Spanish understands the Ladino. There's differences in grammar and syntax. But abre tu puerta cerrada. Open up your closed door. Abre tu puerta cerrada. Que tu balcón luz no hay. There's no light on your balcony, and so on and so forth. So the guy is, he's singing to his beloved, his sweetheart. And I'll just play you. This is a slightly different version than the one that's on the album. The main melody is the same thing, but I'll sing you a verse. And then there's a melody which was created by a certain Israeli troupe, which I'll finish up with. It'll be quick, but you'll get another feel for Sephardi music, especially Ladino. Abre tu puerta cerrada, en tu balcón luz no hay. El amor a ti te venga. Alguien nos acabemos de aquí. So that is definitely 3-beat. Thank you very much, everyone. A 3-beat, a Ladino piece, a romantic sort of serenade, a secular but celebratory song. So Cuando el Nimrod still talks about, our father Abraham, so that there are many aspects of Ladino music. And the Sephardi music, which goes all around the Mediterranean and includes aspects of Arabic modes and music making, though I won't get into that specifically now, I'll deal with it more in the Mizrahi aspect, which I'm coming to right now. So that's the story in a nutshell of Sephardi, the Sephardi stream. Mizrahi is Eastern, literally means Eastern, Mizrahi. Like Mizrach, right? We have always prayed facing Mizrach because we face the East. Of course, it's a bit of an Ashkenazi bias, right? Because the people who lived in the Mizrach, they probably had to face a bit west to face the Jerusalem, right? So we can forgive each other for these things, I hope. Now, in the East, the music that Jewish people found themselves immersed in and borrowing from and giving to and contributing to is a music that is very, very modal. And what I mean by very modal is that even when you hear a Mizrahi type of mode done in Israel, or most of the time, or in the music of Tzimmes, you don't hear the original mode. Because the modes of the Mizrahi music, of Eastern music, East Asian music, Middle Eastern and East, are very specific in terms of the notes that they use. They use quarter tones. There's all kinds of stuff. It comes from Arabic music, but other musics too, like Persian, music of Iran. I want to tell you that I know, because I've worked with people from a lot of Iranians who are, a lot of them are in Vancouver, and they are a lot of professional musicians who have worked with the Vancouver Inter-Cultural Orchestra, which I will talk a little bit about in a moment. One of them told me in no uncertain terms that it is thanks to Jewish people, I guess musicians and philanthropists, that their classical music of Persia, of Iran, was kept alive. So you see, amongst artists, there is this understanding that the Jewish music contribution has been very, very significant. The Jewish contribution to music and to the arts has been very significant in all of these cultures. So, what is the thing about modes in Eastern music? Because it's a difficult thing to explain, even to someone who's a musician who's not familiar with it. But because these notes are very specific, that's the whole spice of the music. And if you harmonize it too much, you actually make those notes certain fixed. They're fixed in certain places, a certain tempered scale, and you can't get out of it. Because if you take, let's say, a very typical mode, like it's called bayati. Bayati is like this havaraba, except the scale of it, except you lower the third. So the havaraba was let me get my guitar, get my proper tune. But Bayati is like a Phrygian, the Phrygian mode that we know from, let's say, E to E on the white keys of the piano. Da da dee da 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 dee da 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 da, not dee da da but da da da. But in the Arabic, Persian, Turkish, the Eastern modes, they will do many different things. For example, you can have a variation of this bayati. It's not bayati anymore, but it's da 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 da. It sounds almost out of tune if you're thinking of a Western ear, but di da da. But I'm just giving you a very quick example of how these things are in between notes, but because of the way they work them and they nuance them, it actually gives a certain flavor to the music that is typical and cannot be substituted by any harmony. So, what Marilyn played for you at the beginning from a Tzimmes album, A Lid for Every Pot, Shabechi Yerushalayim, that is in Bayati. It's actually, but written by an Israeli originally, and so it is harmonized. I forgot my notes here. So that I gave you that Bayati mode, and there it is. Okay, so this is very Bayati and very. It is understood, and the original writer, the songwriter, is Aviu Medina. He is from that tradition, but because we harmonize it, it doesn't have those nuances. If it was being played on the traditional Arabic instruments without all this harmony, you'd hear them sing something like that. I'm not, perhaps you don't get the perfect nuance, but that is how they would sing and play it. So There's another thing that I wanted to say, and this is also part of Sephardi music because, like I said, it has certain Arabic elements in it. But you know what? In klezmer, we also use it sometimes. It is this rhythm. It's called baladi. Dum tek, dum, tek, dum, right? And so that rhythm is called baladi. And it's interesting about the intercultural element of you going all over the place. Klezmer start using it too. So, for example, there's an old klezmer piece called Araber Tanz, means that an Arabic dance. And they actually use it there. So this is how one cultural milieu sort of mixes with another, and the Jewish people have been very good at that. Well, by necessity. The argument that I make about Jewish intercultural bridges is that I believe that we were very smart about trying to preserve our identity amongst, cultures not our own, and people who wanted to assimilate us and convert to their religion. So we incorporated, consciously integrated stuff into our tradition, not just secular music tradition, but in the synagogue as well. And that's what we did consciously. I think that helped to preserve our own identity. So the language or languages that are associated with Mizrahi are Hebrew, of course. Again, Hebrew is everywhere. And in Sephardi music too, though Ladino and Hebrew. And here it's in Mizrach, it's Hebrew and some Arabic. I don't know too many songs in Arabic, but there is a tradition that I know of that a lot of Jewish musicians and Jewish music in the Mizrach has been, sung in Arabic. So that is, I think, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, I could play for you something, but I wanted to get on to the intercultural idea. So now that you know everything you need to know about Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and Mizrahi, if your head is not spinning enough, I have something for you. Basically, the intercultural bridge is what we're doing all the time. It's interesting that Jewish people have been doing it out of kind of necessity, and we've been in all these different cultures, so that we actually have had, I think, a natural sort of, as the people, the wandering people, a natural tendency to do these intercultural bridges, to take something from here, put it together with this, trying to create something new, make it our own, and something like that. Here's a very good example of how Yiddish, when it came to America, it borrowed something from the blacks. Listen to this. I'll play you something, and you'll tell me what it is that really does not exist in Europe, but only happened when the Jewish musicians came to the U.S. Well, came to North America. Schön wie die Sonne, lichtig wie die Sterne, von Himmel auf der Tonne, hast du mir zugeschickt, mein Blick hab ich gewinnen, denn ich hab dich gefunden, du scheinst wie tausend Sonne, hast du mir eins verkehrt, deine Zähne messen gerne, mit deinen schönen Augen, Kinder mit deinen Zugezogen, schön mit dir gewonnen, richtig wie die Sterne, von Himmel auf der Tonne, hast du mich zugeschickt, von Himmel auf der Tonne, hast du mich zugeschickt. All right, so that was Shane Vidi Livona. Now, maybe many of you have heard it. It means lovely as the moon, Shane Vidi Livona. And it's a beautiful love song. What do you think? Of course, you're not going to start answering me out loud, so I'll have to answer the question for you. What do you think was the black element in that? It's the rhythm, it's swing. We didn't have swing in, as far as I know, we didn't have swing in klezmer music in Eastern Europe, in Europe. So that is a perfect example of the intercultural bridge, and you can go on and on about this, because there is a problem of assimilation, in North America and in the free world now that didn't exist before because, people didn't want us to move from our stations, from being Jews. But the thing is that this intercultural bridge, this integrating, is very, very much a hallmark of North American music, especially the music that came from the United States. So, what did Gershwin do? There's this musicological stuff. It's very interesting, of course. It's an anecdote, but it is you could argue that it's quite true. When Gershwin did "It Ain't Necessarily So," how does it go? It ain't necessarily so. Now, does that sound or not sound similar to Baruch Atah Adonai? He was just reinventing his bar mitzvah, for God's sake. And so that's a bit of Gershwin. And, you cannot argue that Irving Berlin's White Christmas is Jewish music. But when you listen to those little movements, that is not an Anglo thing. It's very definitely coming from a Jewish sensibility. Irving Berlin grew up in probably a very traditional environment. I know. Now this gets into the whole question of what makes Jewish music Jewish and stuff like that. That's another can of worms. But it is true that we have been doing this. Jewish musicians have been integrating stuff and have been giving stuff to the cultures around us, taking it in. And I think that has been very, very healthy, actually. Not just for us, but for the world. It's a natural contribution. It actually comes from collaboration. Let's not forget, a lot of I'm doing it today, but a lot of klezmer, in other words, klezmerim, Jewish musicians in Eastern Europe, they were playing with Hungarians and Romanians. They didn't have to be Jewish. They had a gig, you went and did a gig. I'm still doing that. I have several, non-Jewish musicians, wonderful musicians in my band. So that is kind of the story in a nutshell of this this way we have been doing intercultural bridging for all of our years on in the diaspora especially. Today there is a global context, right? We can get in touch with and listen to music of all kinds of cultures, and there's a lot of learning, a lot of collaboration from all sides. And that actually gave rise to the Vancouver Inter-Cultural Orchestra. Some of you know it very well. Some of you might have been to some of our concerts. And I have actually written pieces which utilize my Jewish music to put together with instruments and ideas of other cultures. And I'm going to play you something in a moment. I'm going to, of course, I'm not going to play it myself. I'm not an orchestra yet, but I will, I'll play you something, a recording of some sort. I'm going to do that first, and then I'll give you a little conclusion. This piece, and I will put up the words for it. The actual text is Ahavat Hadassah. Ahavat Hadassah is a beautiful text by Shalem Shabazi, a Yemenite poet who lived in the 17th century, and I've given it several settings. This is one for the Vancouver Inter-Cultural Orchestra. The lead singer here is an Iranian Baha'i, great friend of mine, tenor, and the choir is the Laudate Singers, And the orchestra, you'll certainly hear darabuka, like when you hear Gary and Amber play, you'll hear some darabuka. You'll hear it on this. You'll also hear, I think, some tabla there. And there's other instruments there, like the arhu, the Chinese instrument. Of course, to explain everything and to catch it all is a little bit fast. But you will hear my Jewish music being played by an intercultural orchestra. This piece is around 5.5 minutes, so that'll take us to the place where we could just draw some conclusions about what I said or didn't say. So I'm just going to take a second to organize this, and I'll play for you. This is a Havata Dasa, and I'll put up the lyrics to the song as well, okay? So just a moment. First. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much. That is from a big orchestral piece of mine called Dreams of the Wanderer. So, music of the wanderer, I'm the wanderer. You're the wanderers. Okay, I just wanted to conclude a couple of little things. Hopefully, I could tie this up a little bit. Jewish music is many things, but historically, ours is the music of the wanderer. We take from and contribute to the many cultures that we've lived amongst in order to preserve our own identity, partly, and in order just to have something, to contribute something as an artistic impulse. Today, things are changing in two ways, I'd say. Israel has become a geographic center for integrated Jewish cultural expression. This might become more and more. If you go to Israel, you'll hear all these three streams coming together in different ways. In fact, I've always felt there was a kind of an ideal of that interculturalism in Israel in the early parts, in the early stages of Israel. The music of the Yemenites, which is definitely Mizrahi, with all of their wonderful singing and understanding of melody, and the music of the Ashkenazi, classical musicians and songwriters who loved harmony and putting, that was a tremendously unique marriage. I feel that one of the core influences and core um, uh, emulations that I'd like to make in my life was that intercultural marriage that occurred in Israel early on in its existence, and you can find things like that in the work of Shoshana Damari and in many other singers and many of the composers who put things together. It's people of my generation who would know about it a bit more. But today there's all kinds of other stuff going on. Like Idan Reichel is putting together Ethiopian stuff with Jewish and Israeli sensibility. So this idea of cultural integration is going on a lot. Now, the last thing I want to say is that the global access to many cultures. I mean, you could find, it's not just the internet and Zoom, but I mean, the fact that people are aware more and more and more of other cultures has made possible many intercultural collaborations. And these are giving rise to many new intercultural hybrids and experiences. Not to say that that's the only thing we need. I've always said this: the human being has two choices always to make, and probably has to do both these things. One is to dig a well here, nice and deep, to be established. So that is your own cultural roots and develop it and stuff like that, authenticity, and then go beyond the horizon. See what's beyond that horizon. I'll just give three quick plugs to my work. Um, you will find, I don't know if Marilyn sent this to you, but there was a sheet that had the information about the Tzimmes music, and our main music distributor in the United States called Oi Songs. Again, I'll remind you that in a few months, there's a new Tzimmes album coming out called The Road Never Traveled. And of course, my work that I started with the Vancouver Inter-Cultural Orchestra, it's way beyond just my work in the Vancouver Inter-Cultural Orchestra, but it is also on the web, and you can access the Vancouver Inter-Cultural Orchestra and its work. So let me thank you again, Marilyn, and I'm very, very happy to answer any and all questions. No question is too silly here, okay? Please, go for it.
Well, thank you, Moshe. That was so fantastic. Your presentation style was perfect. I felt like I was in your living room and you were picking up your guitar and giving me examples, and it was so delightful to experience that with you. So I hope everyone felt that likewise. Sam, could you stop the recording now for our question and answer?